All right. So far, what we've done is this MVC uh, pattern, right? So this is, for instance, if we have a class, or let's use our Foursquare as an example. So let's say we have like our venue class, right? That corresponds to, a table. This is our model, right? Model layer. And then this corresponds to a table in the database, like venues, right? And that's our in a table. And we have this one-to-one, basically, of each table, more or less, gets a separate class, right? And then we have these various like relational methods at this level. And then we have a controller, right? So that's here, which is our dunder init file, right? And then we have this, def. So this will be our like dunder init.py. And then we have inside of it, probably like our create app. And then inside of that, we have the at app.route /venues, right? And then we'll do the def venues. And then here we'll, call the find all method or something. Pass through the venue and the cursor. And this will give me, maybe that in itself, right, would give me back all the venues. And we just return this as JSON. So the two JSON, so if this is our model, this is our controller, and then like the two JSON is the view or right, whatever we're sending back to the browser or to the client, the person who makes the request, is like the view, right? That's the response that we send back. So this is like our MVC, right? Is our model, database, controller, and then finally the view, either in the form of HTML that we send back or JSON. So what we'll do now is move into kind of like connect this to a different pattern, which is our ETL pattern. So the way this will work is it's like, so far we've given you the data, right? We've said like load this data into the database. But, as data engineers, well, really, like there's probably lots of APIs we'll need to hit. Like we'll have to hit like the Foursquare API. And in order to do that, we'll use a different design pattern. And by design pattern, I basically mean like, this is a file, right? Like the controller is our file. Controller. And then the model is a file, right? And then the view could be a separate file if it's HTML, for example. And then here to load in the data, we'll also kind of make use of this, of a couple different files. We'll reuse the model, right? Because if we're loading in venues, we'll probably like create a venue instance. But in order to create a venue instance, we need to get the data from somewhere. So we're going to have to like use our requests.get to get, make a request to some sort of API, right, to some sort of URL, get back the response. And then typically what happens is this gives me back, this response.json is messy. Like it's too much information, it's not in the right format, things like that. So the next step, once we get back our data, let's say this is like our venues, venue JSON. What we're going to need to do is convert it, like go through all this data and say like, okay, for venue, I don't know, sometimes I call this venue attributes. For a venue attribute in venue attributes, venues attributes, right? Like somehow extract just the data I want from it, and then we'll get like some clean, nice little dictionaries that we prefer. It has like the restaurant name and like the price, just the stuff we want. And then what we'll do is take this data and we'll create a new venue from there. And then we'll save this venue in the database. So it's like, how are we going to get the data in here? We're going to make a request to an external API, clean it up, and then save it to the database. Or save it down here. Then, this can happen like overnight. We can like just like do this once, or, kind of run this script every day if we want to, whatever. At a separate point in time, the user comes in, they go to our website, the data is already loaded into our database. They make the request /venues. We retrieve it from the database and send it back to them, right, as the JSON. So it's two different patterns, right? This is one, which eventually we'll call, you can call it ETL pattern. It's also called the adapter pattern. We'll kind of flesh this out a little bit more. But so this is one thing. The whole purpose here is to load our data into the database. Separately, we need to and this can happen overnight, right? When, whatever, once a week. This has to occur right when the user requests it. Okay, this is our MVC pattern. Okay, and we're basically building out a code base that connects these two, where the ETL pattern's whole purpose is to load data into our database so that at a later time the user can make a request and get back this data. So how do we do something like this? It's not so bad, I don't think. So, we have this, for example, here's my class for receipt. Here we'll use this Texas. This is the thing that tells us the amount of sales from alcohol that Texas gives us. So if I make a request here to Max's Wine Bar, and then you can see, like I said, we get so much more information than we actually need. Okay, right? This thing is just too large. So we get it back a bunch of, a list of dictionaries. This is going to be long, right? So a list of dictionaries. And what we want to do is extract basically just the information we need. And then that way we can initialize an instance from here. So how do we do that? Let me actually move this here. So how do we do that? So I'm just going to copy over this one line. So let's take a look. Here's my first receipt. It has, like I said, a bunch of stuff we don't need. What we do need, it seems like, is, let's just write them down. Total receipts. We want the address, which I think is this guy, probably the location address. We want the end date, which I think is this one. Responsibility end date. I'm guessing. Yeah. And then we want the restaurant name, which is not that one, this one. Prior location name. And that's good. So how do we go from here to a smaller dictionary? Hopefully y'all could solve this, but I'll just do it. So these are the keys. You can call this maybe my keys, or selected keys. Specify. Yeah, that's fine. And what do we do? If I called out items here, right, this returns me a dict items, and then we can loop through these until we find the ones that we want. So for k comma v in first dictionary dot items, return the k comma v. Right, we can do the tuple thing if we want. If the k is in the selected keys, right? We've seen this before. And there we go. And then, or even better, we can use dictionary comprehension. K colon v, and we're done, and we're good, right? And then from there, these things don't exactly line up. If they did, it would be even easier. We could just splat these. We could do dot value. It's how do I initialize a receipt with this information? We could change the key names. Maybe that's what I'll do, is just take the values. So these are my selected attributes, right? Take the values, Max's Wine, this and this. This is actually enough. And then what we could do, if we know these will always, I'm a little concerned that these can get out of order, but it's okay for this. We can just do receipt. And then probably just, if you do a single star, it will it would pass this through as a this list as separate arguments. One, two. Oh, they're out of order. That won't work. Um, that's annoying. Oh, because I put them out of order, didn't I? No, I didn't. Total. All right. Um, so I guess I probably can't. I can just change this. I don't. In real life, I probably wouldn't do it. In real life, what I would do actually is, because these are out of order, the keys don't line up to this, and I don't want to change my interface. Like this clean part, this part is like using the names I want. I don't want to be beholden to the API, right? Like this is an annoying name. So really, what I would do, even though this may not feel as fancy, is just go by hand and say, here's my receipt. Here's my receipt. Just select it one by one. Like that's fine. So we'll just do this. First receipt. Here's the total. Then we do the location address. This is the location. Right? This actually doesn't take that long. And then we'll do the responsibility end date. And then we'll we'll call this the end date or the date. And then we will do the location name. And this will be our name. Cool. All right, so this should actually, if I remember that, select everything, and then we can just pass through a receipt and pass through, the total, address, restaurant name, right? And make sure these line up. So total equals the total, the location, the address equals the location, the date, end date equals the date, the name equals this. I think that will, I didn't define receipt. Let's just move this up to make it a little more logical. Okay, and that creates my receipt instance. Okay, this whole thing, even though it seems like kind of a mess maybe, is like the ETL pattern. Let me label it for you. So this part does the extracting. Okay, this part is the transforming right here, right, where we're just selecting what we want. And then finally, we can just call save to save this thing to the database, with our save method. So that's fine. When you save it, remember, that will call the insert into statement. And that will load it to the database. All right. So we'll clean this up a little bit, but really what I mean by clean it up is we'll just wrap this code in methods and maybe a couple classes. But this is the whole thing. Like it will get a little bit harder. The transforming part typically becomes a little harder than what we just did, but otherwise, this is more or less what our work involves. Yeah, Conwell?
So I was actually going to ask this related question here. So what we're doing here in these lines, total equal to first receipt, all this stuff, is it a good idea if we have some sort of mapping between the incoming keys versus the keys we want? If in case these keys are part of other models as well, we might require doing this whole stuff in those methods as well. If
We
versus
we
if we have
What do you mean by mapping? Like, should they be called the
like
same thing?
like if I create another dictionary, like a mapping dictionary of some sort, in which the key will be essentially the key we receive and the value will be the key we want.
Right. I guess the point I want to make is they don't have to be the same name. Like I don't like this name, responsibility end date, year. Like I would not have this in my code base. You know? Um,
Yes, that's what I mean. Like, what I'm trying to say here is if we have a dictionary, for example, so we create a dictionary in which the key is, for example, responsibility and date with this whole stuff with the year at the end. And then the value is actually what we want the key to be in our API,
Oh,
which
I
is
see what you're
the
saying. So Conwell's saying this, like just store the relationship, like basically just say, hey, whenever you say whenever you get the key total receipts, that corresponds to total. And whenever you get the key, let's use this one as an example, responsibility end date from the API, that corresponds to, just the end date. And so then, what you can do if you want to ever look it up, like this is literally a dictionary, right? Like here's the definition, here's the corresponding thing, and then you can call this like we'll just use the word mapping for now. If you ever want to see, okay, what does responsibility end date correspond to, or you can probably place this in our code, you can just access the key and it will give you back, right, the value. Yeah, something like that's okay, but you're only really going to be the whole idea of this pattern. I didn't really make this point too clearly. The nice thing about this pattern is, our data comes in as a mess. Like we get back, we make a request. Let me and we get back a bunch of messy JSON. Like I said, it's too much. There's too much of it. It's in the wrong format. All this stuff. So what we do is we clean it up before it really enters the core of our application here. We clean the data so that it's beautiful. Okay, and then we just save it, create an instance out of it, save it in the database. Once it's there, once it's in the database and formatted, right, like just only the data we want in the format we want, we don't really have to clean it again. Like that's a big part of this. Is like this is kind of like, like a bouncer or whatever, or before showtime, right? We're getting everyone cleaned up, and then they're ready, and now our data's right in the database the way we want it. Like this part is things that we control. We just determine what attributes we want to save here, what methods we want. We're no longer beholden to the messy data coming in from our APIs. So the reason why I'm like, we don't really, that might be overkill, is because probably the only time that I really need to pull this out is just like in these 4 lines of code, you know? Like we're not going to have to do this all over the place, probably. Uh, because once I create the receipt, I'm good. And I save it to the database. Yeah, Narapati.
Yes, just out of curiosity. So usually, like the user that like the engineer, I mean, like the main duty is like to make the data available for the user, right? So the user can be analyst or data
Mm-hmm.
scientist. Why do we have to, let's say, write an API if mostly if they want, if they want to use the data, that analysts they can just query from the database? Can
Yeah, I mean,
like
you might also want to make it available. Uh, like sometimes like it could be in a like you may want to make it available to either external users or maybe the application itself could ask for information. Like you could imagine, right, if someone wants to like automatically write code to then, get back a response, right? Like that will work. Like another example, like probably the example you see very often is you'll make a request to like this will feed into a machine learning model, so that you'll make a request of like give me the prediction as to if there's these parameters, like what's the response, and then it may pull data from, it may feed that data into your ML model. But you don't always serve your data this way. You don't always serve your data in API. I get what you're saying. Like you can also make it available just directly through a database, and transform it and do it there. But then typically, part of the reason why we learn about like building APIs is because typically people are going to be writing an API on top of your database. And so much information is located inside the backend code. Like so much data is located inside there. So you need to be able to understand, read, and oftentimes contribute to that. So that's reasons why. And then the other reasons why is because oftentimes that is the way, like while you can directly connect to the database, sometime like lots, I say maybe like 30-40% of the time, the way that maybe you might need the application to connect to like make a request to your API and not directly to the database. Like it may have to go directly to this other kind of isolated database, which if you're using this like microservices architecture. So both are used. Both, like someone might request from an API and someone might request directly from a database. Like just do like a select statement from a database.
I see.
Yeah. You'll
Thank
see
you.
this. Yeah, you'll see this in like it definitely comes up in the like in internships a lot that like people will have to serve back, like make their serve back a response from from an API. The other reason why we do this, like a big reason why we teach APIs too, is just to teach how to work with a large Python code base. And a big part of that is recognizing like these design patterns. Yeah. All right. So yeah. So what we'll do, right? We'll do this ETL. Let me just share the screen again, or share the whiteboard. So we'll do this ETL pattern, right? Where basically what we'll do is we'll clean up the data to then load it into a database. Now, what that involves is really taking, taking a request and then just trying to fit the messy JSON into an instance, right, of our model. Okay. Now, how do we kind of clean this up? Basically, what we'll do is you just give this stuff names. In the adapter pattern language, you'll call, this is called extracting. I prefer to call it like the client, and you can do something like make request and just wrap it in a function. And then, so here's my response, and then we'll return the receipts. We'll call this the restaurant receipts. Okay, so we'll call make request. Then we have this receipt thing. This is our model. This one's actually fine. Okay, and then we have the adapter. So how does this work? The reason why first receipt isn't defined is because what we'll want to do is call this make request. These will be my receipts, right? So this is my list of dictionaries, right? It's a mess. And so what we'll do is we'll say, okay, actually let's wrap this in a function too. So we'll loop through this. This will be for one. We'll just call this receipt. Okay, and then we'll say def transform. I normally use the term select attributes from a receipt. EIPT. And then from here you can, return like a dictionary. We can return this if we want. I'll just do it simple for now. Total is the total. Location is the location, right? And then the date is the date, and then we'll do the name. Sorry, the name is the name. So this will, given a receipt, return this dictionary, right? We can just see that. If you, I just was missing a colon here. If we now take one of these receipts, right? This made our request. We'll just take the first one, and then we'll call select attributes of that receipt. Okay. And now, we see that? Oh, it's just, and we'll do more to this, probably to like lowercase this or whatever, clean up the date to be the format we want. And then from there, you take these selected attributes and we can basically now create an instance with them. I know I did that here, right? So that will be the next thing. Now take these selected attributes and do selected attributes of total. Okay. And selected attributes of a location. And again, we could be fancier with it, but this is fine for now. And selected attributes of the name. Okay, and that creates a receipt instance that looks like we want. And now what do we do from there? Well, this gets back a list of them. So probably what we want to do is, loop through these. Maybe we write a function called, build receipts. EIP. I always spell that name wrong. And we say, okay, after we make this request, here's my list of receipts. Maybe we pass, we take receipts as an argument, and we say something like, for a receipt, and I like calling this actually like receipt attributes, or receipts attributes. So for receipt attribute in receipts attributes, so this one's plural, we'll just do this code, right? We can just, kind of create a receipt. Right, this is pretty straightforward. And then insert it. We can call this my receipts. And just insert it. Append the receipt. And then return it. Okay. So you can kind of see, why does this look weird? I before E, except after C, that's right. Okay. And then, so let's think about it. We make the request. That gives me back, the messy data. We call build receipts, and we'll pass through this, we'll pass through this list of dictionaries, the messy dictionaries. Then for each one, we'll need to first select the attributes, right? We'll need to select the attributes of the receipt. So this will now give me my clean, kind of like selected attributes. And then we'll need to take those attributes, select just the correct, data, create a new receipt instance out of it, append it to the list, and then return it. Okay? So it's really just, I think it's just these two functions. Make the request, get back our messy data. Okay? Then call build receipts that takes the list of the dictionaries, all the messy data, goes through each one, selects the attributes, creates a receipt instance from it, and then returns it. In real life, then we'd probably save it. Just call save on each one and return the list of instances. If you look at this would be my receipts. I broke it. Local variable receipt reference. Oh, this should be called receipt attributes right here. This should be this word right here should be receipt attributes. I think we're okay. Yeah. And now if I look at this returned to me now a list of objects. Okay. For each one of these, you can just look at any one of them, and that has basically just the data we want. Okay, and you can look at the next one. So this is a lot easier to work with. So this pattern, right, like I said, this is called the adapter pattern. And the idea is this part right here, this will be a class. You can call this client, like your Texas API client, and just define this inside of a class. And this, you don't need to, some people will say you don't really need a class for this. Just put it in a separate file. That's okay too. It depends how object-oriented you want to be. And then you just create a new client, right? And then you call the make request function. This is our client, and just do client.make request, and that will do the same thing if I press shift return here. And then make request takes 0 argument. I forgot the self. Sorry. So that does one. So that's our client. And then what we need to do is change the messy data, right? So that would be our that would be the adapter itself. So that, you can call this class, your receipt adapter, right? And that will select the attributes. And we also are going to need self for that. Okay. And you can then call the receipt adapter dot select attributes. So this is the function that will go in like a run file, almost like our Flask, would just call this one function. You can you can basically call this thing, this make request, or I guess this client dot make request. What do I call this? Sorry about that. Sorry that this is Texas API client dot make request, and then you call the build receipt functions, and that will then call the adapter and select the attributes. So all we're doing is we're still just taking that same basic code. I know it feels more complicated now, and maybe it is, but what we're doing is we're taking that same basic code, we're just wrapping it in a function, and then wrapping the function in a class. The reason why people make it this complicated is oftentimes because there's API keys here, and so you'll store the API key here, and really what you'll do is, import it from settings or something like that. But it's your whole application doesn't need to know about the API key, so you just put in this class, and now it's kind of contained here, right? And you can, pass it through. This model stays the same, and then again it's the same thing. The adapter, it's why do we really need a class for this? Maybe you don't, but do know that this function will get longer, So probably you'll want to have the ability to break this up into a couple different functions as this gets longer, okay? And then you just tie it together, and you say, okay, let's make the request from the client, then we'll change everything in the adapter, and return for me the list of receipts. This should honestly be moved to the adapter as well. You would select the attributes and then build a receipt. Okay, so I know this may feel confusing. It's not that confusing. I'll let you go through it. I think that you'll be fine if you just go through the readings. We'll obviously review this again on Tuesday and for the next 3 months. Let me deploy this. I really think you'll be fine. And basically, this is kind of it. We've learned these 3 main patterns. This will get us to a code base. You'll see that's pretty large. And so many applications really just use the patterns that we've used. The ORM pattern, the ETL pattern, and the MVC pattern. Okay, so let me publish this. So I'll do this. I think we'll do these. And then you'll see this is a better version of my code that I was just writing out. I'll deploy this too. So I'll deploy these readings. Get through as many as you can. Take your time, and then we'll pick this back up next week.